Hi, Sandy Kalukas here, and I'm going to talk about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. And you can see there that I put in difference under deficit. I really liked what Stephen Tonti talked about in his video, ADHD as a difference in cognition. I think that's a good way for us to look at it instead of looking at it as a deficit. Kids with ADHD are going to need some special services and special help, but they can go on to be super successful and do a great job. What is ADHD? According to the National Institute of Mental Health, ADHD is a disorder marked by an ongoing pattern of inattention and or hyperactivity impulsivity that interferes with functioning or development. Symptoms and diagnosis. ADHD is diagnosed when an individual has chronic and serious inattentiveness, hyperactivity, and or impulsivity that is more severe and occurs more frequently than in peers. Students with ADHD generally have multiple symptoms that are seen across two or more settings and that interfere with academic or social functioning. ADHD symptoms can vary quite a bit by student and by age. There are a couple different types. Predominantly inattentive type. These students have a hard time focusing on one thing, especially if they're not really interested in what they're focusing on or trying to focus on. They often appear to daydream. They may not hear directions. They'll skip parts of an assignment that they don't notice, and they frequently lose things. However, they do not physically move more than their peers. Now, if it's predominantly hyperactive, impulsive type of ADHD, students in this group physically move much more than their peers, and they tend to be impulsive, acting before thinking. They squirm in their seats, they tap their pencils or their fingers, or tear up little pieces of paper, they blurt out answers. And then sometimes you have them combined. And students in the combined type group display characteristics of both of the other types of ADHD. They experience extraordinary difficulty in both focusing their attention and in restricting their movement. And of course, when you're thinking about all of these, you have to think about age appropriateness too. I wouldn't expect a preschooler to be able to sit still. So you have to think about that as well. So really comparing them to peers and what's appropriate for their grade level and age is really important. So in order to diagnose ADHD, for children, you want 6 or more of the following symptoms. For adults, only 5 or more. So doesn't pay close attention to details or makes careless mistakes, has problems staying focused on tasks or activities, does not seem to listen, does not follow through on instructions, doesn't complete schoolwork, has problems organizing tasks and work. They may avoid or dislike tasks that require sustained mental effort, such as preparing reports or completing forms. They often lose things needed for daily tasks or life. Easily distracted. They forget daily tasks, such as doing their chores, running errands. Older teens and adults may forget to return phone calls or pay bills or keep appointments. For the hyperactive impulsive type, for children, we need 6 or more of the following symptoms to occur frequently in order for a diagnosis. So fidgets, taps their feet, squirms in their seat, not able to stay seated, runs around, climbs on things where it's inappropriate, unable to play or do leisure activities quietly, always on the go, talking too much, blurting out things, having difficult waiting their turn, interrupts or intrudes on others. And again, we really need to think about age appropriateness. You know, a kindergartner is going to blurt out things sometimes. Doesn't mean they have ADHD. So interventions for students with ADHD. We have behavior interventions, parent education, medication, academic interventions, and then we're going to talk about environmental supports and families with children with ADHD. So in behavior interventions, we need to consider the environment, minimize distractions. You don't want a bunch of stuff hanging from the ceiling, lots of bright things, lights that are, super bright and flashing, things like that in the classroom. And sometimes the student will need to stand. If you can get those countertop desks that have the little bar on the bottom of them, and then students, when they need to stand up, they can stand at their desk. That works really well for students with ADHD. We need to emphasize structure. Structure is incredibly important in being consistent for kids with ADHD. Rewards, especially praise, is huge, really valuable for students with ADHD. And if you can't say things out loud all the time, maybe give them a little written note, put a sticker of a star on their paper, something like that. When you do need to redirect a student with ADHD, we need to be very clear and concise and calm, and don't take anything personally, because they really can't help it oftentimes. Parent education. So it's important to find resources for parents and invite them, send them links to different pages where they can find information that is reliable and accurate. If there are meetings, maybe a local hospital or medical center has an informational meeting about ADHD, send them that information and build a partnership with them. If we're using the same strategies at school as they're using at home of rewards and consequences, that will go a long way. Medication. Okay, I think the biggest thing I took away from this is that parents need to make the decisions about medications with their doctors. It's not up to us as teachers to tell a parent that they need to give their student medication. It's up to the parents to make that decision with the doctor, which I'm thankful for. I don't think it's up to me to decide that. Medication is the most common intervention for children with ADHD. As you can see, about 70% of the 6 million children with ADHD are taking medication to manage symptoms. Now, taking medication really only controls symptoms. It doesn't change, it doesn't get rid of the condition. So using medication to control the symptoms of ADHD is sometimes controversial. Some believe that the side effects are worse than the symptoms, or that it will predispose children to drug abuse later in life. So if a parent doesn't want to give medication, we really need to have them talk with a doctor about that and weigh those risks and benefits and have them figure that out. Sometimes students don't consistently take their medications. They might share their medications with other students. I know that I've heard of this happening on college debate teams, students taking Adderall and different things to help them prepare and get through. So just something to be on your radar. According to our textbook, as a teacher, your responsibilities related to medication are indirect. You should know about the medications commonly prescribed, alert your school nurse and parents if you suspect that a change in student learning or behavior might be related to medication, and be prepared to respond to parental and medical inquiries regarding the effects of medication on a particular student. And our textbook had a lot of really good information about all of the different medications, advantages, disadvantages, and different comments about them. And so I included these things in this presentation, even though I don't have time to read through all of them. But I just wanted to have this information handy in case we ever need it. So it's there. Academic intervention. Students with ADHD often struggle academically, obviously. We need to keep our instructions simple and concise. Try to keep to only essential information. So don't give students 15 steps, one step at a time, or write it on the board. Essential information, perhaps even highlight things in their work to let them know what they need to be focusing on. Assign reading in small portions, and then check for competency or comprehension after each small portion instead of after a large reading assignment. Provide extra time for math problems. They're going to need it. In large group instruction, we got to keep the pace moving and keep it upbeat and give them plenty of opportunities to interact and participate. And we need to be highly structured and clear in our instructions. And of course, the include strategy will work with students with ADHD as well. Don't have much time left, so I'm not going to read through all of it, but we do need to identify the demands that they're going to need to meet, and then note their strengths and needs, check for areas of success, look for problems, and then brainstorm ways to differentiate, and then evaluate student progress regularly. There's a whole bunch of really great practical teaching strategies for teaching students with ADHD. Preparing them ahead, I think, is really important, especially if there's going to be a change in a schedule or activity or something like that. Write your schedule on the board, have it somewhere clear that they can look at it, and make sure they know what's coming and what to expect. Don't surprise them with anything. Provide a clear list of what they are going to need and have it somewhere that they can find it and see it readily so they know what to do. If we're switching to math, you're going to need your math notebook and a pencil and an eraser, and make sure that they have that list somewhere easy for them to find. Review previous lessons. Clearly state learning and behavior expectations and objectives. I'm going to go through these kind of quickly. We need to be very predictable. Structure and consistency are vital for our kids with ADHD, and really for most of our kids. We want to use a variety of methods to present materials, reading, audio, visual, all the different ways of presenting things. We want to make sure that we're not just doing the same thing all the time. We want to ask probing questions that are kind of directing them toward the correct answer. We want to frequently check their understanding and continually evaluate them. We really want to be able to help students identify and correct their own mistakes. So those leading questions will help with that. We need to follow up on directions by checking for understanding and clarify if we need to. We need to keep the noise level and the distractions in the classroom to a minimum, which I know sometimes this is difficult, but that's really important for our kids with ADHD. Helping them learn cooperative learning strategies is also vital for them to help them build those social skills, and help them have a little bit of ownership over what they're learning. Technology can be powerful for kids with ADHD. It will provide interactive instruction that's more visual if that's what type of learner they are. Always provide a warning when a lesson is about to conclude, and then give a preview of the next one to make those transitions easier. Environmental supports. We need to keep the classroom uncluttered. Students with ADHD may benefit from the use of these three-sided, we usually use them for tests where they have these three-sided things around their desk so they don't see all this stuff around them. Practice instruction to mix tedious and repetitive tasks with others. And then with those that offer students more variety and activity. And when dealing with families of children with ADHD, it's important not to blame parents or blame the family. Oftentimes, I think parents feel very on guard and as if people are going to think something's wrong with them because their child has ADHD. And so I think it's really important to point out to them that there are lots of successful people who have ADHD. This is something that people overcome. It's not their fault, but it's also important not to condone inappropriate behavior. So if the student's coming to school late every day and has never eaten breakfast and says they don't get to bed till midnight, it might be something to bring up that, did you know children this age need 10 hours of sleep a night, and, something like that. But being very careful not to use a tone where it sounds like we're blaming them. ADHD really adds a lot of stress to families, so it's important that we don't add to that stress. We need to be there to help and work as partners with them. Actually, I'm going to go back. And I think this goes along with working with families to make sure we're using the same strategies of rewards and consequences and things like that. And if we do that, if we all are on the same page and we're working together as a team, we really can help these kids excel and help their families lessen a whole lot of stress. And here's my references, and thank you for listening. Bye.